The Zyrek patrol ship drifted through the cold void of space, its dark hull blending with the endless stars. Captain Vorkun leaned forward in his command chair, his sharp, reptilian eyes narrowing at the strange readings flickering across his control panel. There was something out there, something massive, moving slowly but with purpose. It was not listed in any database, and it wasn't responding to hails. "Are the scanners malfunctioning?" Vorkun growled, his voice deep and laced with irritation. His second-in-command, Officer Telrek, double-checked the instruments, his clawed fingers tapping against the console. "No, Captain. The readings are confirmed. Whatever this is, it's big. And it's not Zarek or any known empire." A cold silence settled over the bridge. The Zarek Empire prided itself on being the dominant force in this sector. Every major civilization either bowed to their rule or was crushed under their fleets. Yet now, an unidentified warship had entered their domain, defying every rule of order they had established. "Send a warning signal," Vorkun commanded. "Tell them to stop immediately, or we will open fire." The communication officer relayed the message, broadcasting in every known frequency. But there was no response, no acknowledgement. The ship continued on its path, moving at a steady pace, completely ignoring the Zyrek patrols. The tension in the control room thickened. Vorkun had seen many battles in his lifetime, had faced fleets that outnumbered his own. But nothing unnerved him quite like this. An enemy that refused to react, as if it didn't even recognize them as a threat. "Captain, should we engage?" Telrek asked, his voice unusually hesitant. Vorkun clenched his jaw. The Zarek Empire did not tolerate unknown forces in their territory. If this ship would not answer, then it would be forced to respond. "Lock weapons. Fire a warning shot." The patrol ship's cannons charged with a deep hum, plasma energy building until it was released in a bright bolt of destruction. The shot traveled through space, striking the unknown vessel directly. And then, nothing happened. The energy blast vanished, absorbed into the ship's hull, as if it had never existed. No damage, no reaction. Vorkun's hands tightened on the armrests of his chair. That was impossible. No shielding technology in the known galaxy could completely nullify a direct hit. Even the strongest barriers flickered or showed signs of impact. A shiver ran down the captain's spine. He opened his mouth to issue a new command when suddenly, the ship responded, not with words, but with action. In an instant, every system on the Zyrek patrol ship went dark. The lights flickered out, consoles shut down, and even the emergency power failed. The crew was thrown into chaos, shouting as they tried to restore control. "Captain," Telrek's voice cut through the panic. We've lost all systems. Weapons, engines, life support. Everything is offline." Vorkun slammed his fist against the dead console, his heart pounding. How? What kind of technology could disable a ship this fast? Then, across the darkened bridge, a single message appeared on the central screen. "Do not interfere." The letters burned bright in an unknown, yet eerily precise script. It was a warning, a simple, clear warning. And then, before Vorkun could react, the unknown warship moved. There was no visible weapon fire, no bright explosions. The Zyrek fleet simply disappeared from the scanners, one by one, wiped from existence as if they had never been there. In mere seconds, an entire squadron of battle-hardened warriors was erased from reality. The only thing that remained was silence. Far away, deep within the Zarek Empire, the High Council received the distress signal just before it was abruptly cut off. The transmission was garbled, filled with static, but a few words came through before the final blackout. "It's not a fleet. It's just one ship. And we can't stop it." The message ended, and the galaxy shuddered in fear. The Zyrek High Council chamber was a grand hall, carved from obsidian stone and illuminated by cold, artificial lights. Seated in a massive circle were the most powerful leaders of the Empire, warlords, admirals, and high-ranking officials. They had ruled the galaxy with an iron grip for centuries. But now, for the first time in generations, there was something they did not understand. The Xyrek battle fleet moved through the void with precision, their warships forming a vast wall of destruction. Each vessel was armed with weapons capable of reducing planets to rubble, and at the center of this formation stood Admiral Tarkis' flagship, the Zalkish, the pride of the Xyrek Empire. The target was now in sight. Tarkis studied the screen before him. The human warship was there, still moving with quiet purpose. It was alone, without escorts, without reinforcements. There was something unsettling about the way it drifted through space, as if it had no concern for the armada standing in its path. "Open a channel," Tarkis commanded. His voice was steady, but his claws tapped against the armrest of his chair in impatience. A deep static filled the bridge for a moment before his communication officer shook his head. "No response. Admiral, they are ignoring us." Tarkis narrowed his eyes. "Then they have made their choice." He stood, his dark uniform glinting under the lights of the command deck. "Power up the primary cannons. If they do not surrender, we will erase them from existence." The fleet's weapons charge, energy pulsing along the hulls of Xyrek warships. Their firepower had crushed entire civilizations before. This one ship would be no different. Fire. 100 beams of plasma and ion energy shot forward, filling the darkness of space with blinding destruction. The combined power of the Xyrek fleet slammed into the human warship. Direct hits, one after another. And then, nothing. The energy disappeared as soon as it struck the ship's hull. There were no explosions, no shields flickering under impact. It was as if the warship absorbed the attack effortlessly. Gasps filled the bridge. Tarkis' claws dug into his armrest, his cold blood turning to ice. "Impossible," one of his officers whispered. "No ship can withstand that level of firepower." And then, for the first time, the human warship responded. It moved, not with the slow, deliberate pace it had before, but with impossible speed. One moment it was floating lifelessly, the next it had vanished from the scanners, only to reappear behind the fleet. A warning blared across the bridge. "It's repositioning. I've never seen anything move like that. Turn the fleet around." Tarkis barked, but before they could react, the warship struck back. There was no traditional weapon fire, no bright plasma beams, no missile launches. Instead, the Xyrek warships simply ceased to exist. One by one, vessels vanished, wiped from the battlefield as if they had never been there. Entire crews, hundreds of Xyrek warriors, were gone in the blink of an eye. Panic broke out across the fleet. Ships tried to retreat, but it didn't matter. The human warship was unstoppable, its presence overwhelming. Admiral Tarkis' heart pounded. He had never feared death before. He had stood in battlefields filled with fire and blood, had led countless victories. But now, staring at this silent, merciless force, he understood what true terror was. His final words were barely a whisper. "This is not a warship. It is something else." And then, the Zalkish, the greatest warship in the Xyrek fleet, was erased fro. The holographic image of Captain Vorkun flickered in the center of the chamber. His face, usually hardened by years of war, was tight with fear. The recording played his last moments, his panicked voice reporting that the enemy was not a fleet, but a single warship. Then the message cut off. The silence in the chamber was suffocating. "This must be some kind of deception," a general growled. His dark armor clanked as he stood. No single ship could erase an entire fleet without firing a shot. Others murmured in agreement. The idea of a lone vessel wiping out a Xyrek patrol force was absurd. And yet, the patrol was gone. Supreme Chancellor Xelvar, the highest authority in the Xyrek Empire, leaned forward in his throne. His sharp red eyes glowed with thought. "What do we know about this warship?" An intelligence officer stepped forward, his scaly fingers trembling as he operated his data pad. "We have confirmed the ship is human in origin." The chamber erupted into chaos. Warlords slammed their fists against the stone tables. Admirals cursed in disbelief. Impossible. Someone roared. Humanity is a primitive species. They were barely exploring their own solar system a century ago. This is a trick. A stolen ship, perhaps, another suggested. Zelvar raised a hand, silencing the room. His voice was calm, but there was something unsettling in his tone. If the ship is human, then where did they get such technology? And why would they send it into our space? The intelligence officer swallowed hard. We do not know, but our long-range sensors show that the ship is still moving. It has not changed course. It is heading deeper into Zurich-controlled space. If it continues, it will reach Velker Prime within days. A fresh wave of tension filled the air. Velker Prime was a major Zurich stronghold, home to millions of warriors and one of the largest naval bases in the Empire. If this human warship reached the planet, it could mean disaster. Zelvar's voice was sharp. Then we do not wait. We crush it. The order was simple, absolute. The Zurich were an empire of conquerors. If a threat appeared, they did not fear it. They destroyed it. A battle fleet was assembled within hours. Dozens of warships, each powerful enough to obliterate a small planet, were deployed toward the approaching vessel. Their orders were clear: eliminate the intruder. Aboard the lead battleship, Admiral Tarkus watched the void of space through his command screen. He had fought many wars, defeated countless enemies. This time would be no different. And yet, as the human warship came into view, still moving silently, unshaken by the approaching armada, he felt something deep inside him, a feeling he had never known before. The Zurich High Council chamber was silent. The warlords, admirals, and intelligence officers who had once ruled the galaxy with absolute confidence now sat frozen, their reptilian eyes wide with disbelief. The battle fleet was gone, not defeated, not damaged, but erased. Admiral Tarkus' final transmission had cut off mid-sentence. No distress signals had been sent. No escape pods had launched. It was as if the entire fleet had never existed. Supreme Chancellor Zelvar gripped the edge of his throne, his claws digging deep into the ancient stone. His voice was sharp as a blade. Are there any survivors? The intelligence officer before him hesitated, his scaled hands trembling as he read from his datapad. None. The fleet is. It's gone, Chancellor. We lost contact the moment the human warship engaged. The chamber filled with hushed whispers. The Zurich had fought countless wars, crushed entire species under their rule. Never had they suffered such a loss. And the worst part, they still had no idea how it had happened. A warlord slammed his fist against the table. This is a violation of Zurich space. We must retaliate. With what? Another snapped. You saw the reports. We threw our entire battle fleet at that ship, and it didn't even break stride. The tension in the room thickened. The Zurich Empire had always ruled by fear. They had never been on the other side of it. Zelvar inhaled slowly, trying to suppress the storm of emotions inside him. We cannot afford panic, he said coldly. We are still the Zurich Empire. We will find a way to defeat this thing. The room quieted as the Chancellor activated the Galactic Intelligence map. A massive holographic projection of the Empire appeared in the air before them. One by one, key planets and military bases lit up, showing defensive positions. The human warship was still moving. Slowly, steadily, toward the heart of the Zurich Empire. Zelvar's eyes narrowed. This is not a simple invasion. It's not attacking at random. It has a purpose. A scientist stepped forward, his voice uneasy. Chancellor, we analyzed the trajectory. If it continues on this path, it will reach Karvok Prime within days. A heavy silence fell over the room. Zarvok Prime, the Zurich homeworld, the heart of their empire, the planet where their civilization had first begun, where the ruling families held power, where the largest fleet in the galaxy was stationed. Warlords exchanged nervous glances. If the warship wasn't stopped there, then... Zelvar stood, his voice cutting through the fear like steel. Then we will stop it. I will summon the Imperial dreadnoughts. A murmur of shock rippled through the chamber. The dreadnoughts, colossal warships that had only been used in the greatest wars of Xyric history. Each one was a moving fortress, capable of unleashing destruction on an unimaginable scale. "Prepare every warship we have left," Zelvar ordered. His voice was steady, but deep inside, even he felt it. The creeping fear. If the human warship had erased an entire battle fleet, would even the dreadnoughts be enough? The Xyric Empire had never known fear, until now. Across the Empire, warships were mobilizing. Massive dreadnoughts, each the size of a small moon, were awakening from their long slumber. These behemoths had been forged in the fires of past galactic wars, their weapons powerful enough to reduce entire worlds to dust. They had never been defeated. And now, they were the last hope of the Xyric. Supreme Chancellor Zelvar stood at the heart of HFY Prime, staring at the massive holographic display before him. The human warship was still moving, still following its relentless course. It did not change direction, did not slow down. It did not acknowledge the fleets sent against it. It simply moved forward. Admiral Krell, the new commander of the Xyric forces, saluted sharply. His voice was firm, but there was an edge of unease beneath it. "Chancellor, our dreadnought fleet is in position. They are waiting for your command." Zelvar's eyes narrowed. Do they understand what they are facing? Krell hesitated before answering. They have been briefed. But most believe Admiral Tarkis' fleet was simply careless. They are confident the dreadnoughts will succeed. Zelvar exhaled slowly. They didn't understand. Not yet. But they would. The human warship had already entered the final defensive zone. There was no more room for failure. If the Xyric couldn't stop it here, at the gates of their homeworld, then there was no stopping it at all. The command was given. 1,000 Xyric warships surged forward, surrounding the human vessel from all sides. The dreadnoughts moved into formation, their massive cannons locking onto the intruder. "Fire at will," Krell ordered. The galaxy burned. A storm of energy, plasma, and antimatter detonations erupted across space, enough firepower to vaporize a star. The Xyric fleet had learned from their mistakes. They did not wait to see the results. They fired again, and again. For 5 full minutes, the sky was filled with destruction. Then, the light faded. The warship was still there, untouched. The Xyric officers on the bridge froze, their eyes locked on the scanners. It wasn't possible. No technology in the galaxy could have withstood that. The human warship remained where it was, drifting silently in the aftermath of the assault. And then, it moved. But it wasn't attacking. It was broadcasting. A deep, distorted voice echoed across every Xyric warship, every city, every screen across the Empire. You were warned. The lights on the human warship pulsed. Reality itself seemed to twist. Then, the first dreadnought disappeared. There was no explosion, no debris. It was simply gone. Another followed, then another. The Xyric fleet collapsed into chaos. Warlords screamed for their ships to retreat. Captains abandoned their formations. Panic spread like wildfire. And at the center of it all, the human warship remained, unstoppable, inevitable. Supreme Chancellor Zelvar clenched his fists as the capital of his empire trembled beneath him. For the first time in Xyric history, they were powerless. The Xyric homeworld, HFY Prime, was a fortress. Its skies were patrolled by thousands of warships, its surface protected by planetary shields so strong they could withstand supernova-level blasts. The Empire had ruled for centuries from this world, believing it to be untouchable. Until now. From the Grand War Room, Supreme Chancellor Zelvar watched the holographic battle map. His claws dug into the armrest of his throne. The display showed one single red dot, the human warship. It was close. Too close. "Where is the fleet?" Zelvar demanded, his voice cold and sharp. A general swallowed hard. We lost contact with Admiral Voker's forces. The entire fleet is." He hesitated. "Gone, Chancellor." The room fell into a stunned silence. Gone. Not defeated. Not scattered. Just erased. Zelvar's eyes burned with rage. "Then we stop it here. Activate the planetary defense grid. Power up the dreadnoughts. Deploy every warship we have left. Sarvok Prime must not fall." The command spread through the Empire's networks. Across the planet, massive railguns and plasma turrets locked onto the approaching warship. The remaining Xyrek fleet, over 10,000 warships, formed a wall of firepower in orbit. And then, at last, the human warship arrived. It drifted toward Sarvok Prime slowly, as if unbothered by the defenses before it. Then the Xyrek forces opened fire. The largest barrage in galactic history rained down upon the warship. Plasma beams, nuclear warheads, railgun slugs. Every weapon imaginable was unleashed. For 30 solid minutes, the Xyrek unleashed hell. And then the smoke cleared. The warship was still there, untouched, unshaken. The Xyrek command center erupted into chaos. Generals shouted over each other. Warlords slammed their fists against the tables. Zelvar's claws dug so deep into the armrest that the stone cracked. "Impossible," he whispered. The warship moved. It wasn't attacking. It was descending. It was going to land. Panic spread through the planet. Xyrek civilians, once so sure of their empire's dominance, ran for shelter. Soldiers readied their weapons. Warlords prepared their final stands. The warship pierced the planetary shield like it wasn't even there and began its descent toward the Xyrek capital. Zelvar stood, staring at the screens. His empire, his world. Asterisk, asterisk, everything he had ever known. Asterisk, asterisk was now under the shadow of something that should not exist. For the first time in his life, he felt it. Dread. The shadow of the warship covered the Xyrek capital as it descended. Buildings that had stood for thousands of years trembled under its presence. Streets once filled with the proud and mighty Xyrek people were now deserted, their inhabitants having fled to bunkers or armed themselves in a desperate attempt to fight back. But deep down, they all knew the truth. Nothing could stop this. In the Grand War Room, Supreme Chancellor Zelvar watched as the warship landed in the heart of the Xyrek capital. No weapons fired. No troops emerged. It simply stood there, as if waiting. A general turned to Zelvar, his voice barely a whisper. What do we do?" Zelvar's hands tightened into fists. "We fight." The last of the Xyrek army was mobilized. Tanks, soldiers, walkers, everything the Empire had left was deployed around the warship. Then it finally moved. A single hatch opened. A figure stepped out. Not a fleet, not an army. One single human. They wore a sleek black battlesuit, its surface shimmering with an unknown energy. Their helmet obscured their face, but the glowing red visor sent a clear message. This was not a negotiation. Zelvar's breath caught in his throat. They sent one. Just one. The Xyrek army hesitated. Their instincts screamed at them to run. Then the human spoke. Their voice rang across the entire city. No speakers, no comms, just a clear and absolute presence. "Your empire ends today." The ground shook. Before the Xyrek could react, the warship activated something, a pulse of energy that rippled through the city, shutting down every weapon, every vehicle, every piece of technology. The Xyrek were defenseless. Panic erupted. Soldiers tried to fight with their bare hands. Warlords screamed commands that no one could follow. Zelvar, for the first time in his rule, felt helpless. Then the human stepped forward. And the Xyrek Empire, which had ruled the galaxy for centuries, finally fell. The Xyrek capital lay in silence. The air, once filled with the roar of engines and the hum of energy weapons, was now still. The Zyrek army, once feared across the stars, stood frozen, their weapons useless, their war machines lifeless. And at the heart of it all, one lone human. Their black battle suit gleamed under the blood-red sky of HFY Prime. Their helmeted gaze swept across the sea of defeated warriors, the once proud conquerors of the galaxy now reduced to nothing. Then they spoke again. "Your empire is over." Zelvar stood atop the Grand War Room's balcony, staring down at the impossible scene below. One person, one warship, and an entire empire brought to its knees. This can't be real." A warlord muttered beside him, his voice shaking. How could this happen? But there was no answer. Because this was real. A new message crackled through every speaker, every communication line on HFY Prime. It wasn't from the Zyrek. It was from Earth. A deep, commanding voice filled the air. "The Zyrek Empire is no more. Your rule of terror ends today. The galaxy will remember this moment, not as the day you fell, but as the day humanity proved that tyrants will never reign forever." Across the capital, Zyrek citizens dropped their weapons. Some fell to their knees in surrender. Others simply stood in stunned silence, unable to comprehend what had happened. Then the warship moved. It didn't fire weapons. It transmitted something, a pulse that spread outward, reaching beyond the planet, beyond the system. And in an instant, the Zyrek Empire ceased to exist. Their ships across the galaxy shut down. Their war fleets became useless metal husks drifting in space. Their communications vanished. Their power grids collapsed. HFY Prime was now a dead world, its people left only with the consequences of their own cruelty. Zelvar fell back into his throne, his claws trembling. "It's over," he whispered. The lone human turned, walking back toward the warship. No more words, no threats. Their mission was complete. As the warship rose into the sky, disappearing into the stars, the galaxy watched in fear and awe. Humanity had arrived, and nothing would ever be the same again. The galaxy trembled in the aftermath. The Zyrek Empire, once a force feared by countless civilizations, was now a hollow shell of its former self. Across the stars, planets that had once been under Zyrek rule witnessed the impossible. Their oppressors had fallen overnight. And the ones responsible? Humans. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some whispered that Earth had hidden its true strength for centuries, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Others claimed the warship that had ended the Zyrek Empire wasn't a ship at all, but a living weapon, something beyond technology, beyond understanding. But one thing was clear. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted. On a distant world, a council of galactic leaders gathered in secret. For centuries, they had watched the rise and fall of empires, carefully maintaining order from the shadows. But now, as they sat around a vast circular table, there was only one topic of discussion: humanity. They did not just defeat the Zyrek, a reptilian diplomat hissed. They erased them, their fleets, their armies, their entire infrastructure, gone. Not conquered, not occupied, just removed from existence. A cybernetic envoy from the Xalvana Union leaned forward. If one Terran warship can do this, what happens if they send a fleet next time? The room fell silent. For centuries, the galaxy had mocked humanity. They had been seen as a young species, too insignificant to challenge the great powers. But now, humanity was the greatest unknown threat the galaxy had ever faced. A towering warlord, his armor adorned with the sigils of the Vorkan Dominion, slammed a fist onto the table. "We must act now. We cannot allow Earth to become the next galactic superpower." Murmurs of agreement spread through the chamber. Plans were discussed. Alliances formed. A galactic war against humanity was no longer a question of if, but when. But deep within the darkness of space, beyond the reach of spying eyes, the Terran War Council was already watching. A lone figure stood aboard an observation deck, staring out at the endless void. The same warrior who had ended the Zyrek Empire with a single warship. Their visor gleamed with an eerie red glow. They had expected this. Humanity knew the galaxy would never accept what had happened. That fear would turn into hatred. That the surviving powers would band together against Earth. And humanity was ready. A fleet of black warships emerged from the shadows, their hulls cloaked in technology beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. The First War was over, but the real battle had just begun.